In the war between Israel and Hamas, surely no one will be cynical enough to exploit this situation in order to make a profit. You wouldn't expect, for example, members of US Congress to be investing in military-related stocks, would you? Well, you should expect that. Hello there, you awakening wonders. Thanks for joining us on our voyage to truth and freedom at a time where it is necessary more than ever to look at the world through different eyes and, importantly, support independent media where you can so we can have complex conversations about complex matters and review and analyze potential solutions together. Certainly no one can claim to have answers with something as complicated as this, but it's beneficial for us individually, collectively, globally, if such a thing were ever possible. Please make it revealed now. Obviously, with something as sensitive as this, you wouldn't imagine that there will be anyone anywhere in the world looking to exploit such a sensitive and awful situation from which nobody really clearly benefits, if you ask me, to be looking for opportunities to profit. And yet that is precisely what's happening. Military experts are predicting record profits for weapons manufacturers, as always happens in war, and that's a brutal reality, I suppose. But you certainly wouldn't expect, would you, members of the United States Congress to be investing in defense-related stocks? Wouldn't that undermine everything they've been telling you about the authenticity of their feelings, however they regard this conflict or claim to regard this conflict? All of the grandstanding and moralizing and the sympathetic I stand with or we must be pro. How does that look in light of the fact that members of Congress have been investing in military-related stocks? 2020. If you were an investor, if you are a trader, even if you're an ordinary person who dabbles in financial matters, the fact is that it would be sensible, expedient, wise, frugal, fiduciary action to invest in these companies at this time. And doesn't that suggest that we've entered a moral space that is baffling, bedazzling, bewitching, and bewildering? Because if there is any action that can be taken in this time that's beneficial for a personal and financial perspective, a war that's being fought territorially, on spiritual values, or at least religious edicts, is somewhat out of line with the direction of power and finance. Shouldn't this financial component at least somehow be ameliorated, omitted, amended? Shouldn't this at least be resolved? Because I recognize that so much of what's happening is impossible to resolve without a degree in history, a deep understanding of ethics, a willingness to think the unthinkable, open-heartedness, transcendence of personal values, tribalism, deep understandable pain. I mean, this at least could be addressed. Commenting on the bloodshed in Israel and Gaza over the past few days, Samir Samana, senior global market strategist at Wells Fargo Investment Institute, told MarketWatch that as countries need to replenish their weapons, we do think defense companies will do very well. So it's not all bad news. Sometimes I look at this and feel incredible despair and that there may not be a way out for us without almost inconceivable personal and global change. But over at Wells Fargo, they can see the bright side of all of this horror and death. Less than 2 months after Russia's invasion last year, William Hartung, a senior research fellow at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, highlighted how such conflicts benefit the arms industry, writing that the war will indeed be a bonanza for the likes of Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. Last December in Forbes, Hartung warned against using the Russia-Ukraine war to permanently expand the weapons industry. Plans that have been floated so far include building new weapons factories, dramatically boosting production of ammunition, anti-tank weapons and other systems, and easing oversight of weapons procurement. Let's ease that oversight. People don't want someone peering at them when they're trying to sell weapons. These changes will come at a cost that over time will run into tens of billions of dollars above current spending plans and possibly more, much more. At a time when the Pentagon budget is soaring towards $1 trillion per year and debates about how to respond to the challenges posed by Russia and China are front and centre, it is more important than ever to make an independent assessment of the best path forward. Can we all agree on that? Ideally, this would involve objective analysis by unbiased experts and policymakers grounded in a vigorous public conversation about how best to defend the country, but more often than not, special interests override the national interest in decisions on how much to spend on the Pentagon and how those funds should be allocated. Even in this incredibly sensitive issue, you have seen bombastic rhetoric designed to make you feel honesty and transparency, and yet yet simultaneously it's impossible to ignore that very powerful industries that lobby and spend a lot of money are profiting, and people in Congress who are entrusted with the moral heart of a nation are plainly acting in self-interest. With so much that is difficult to discuss, with so much that is uncertain, let us plainly state that that kind of corruption should be ended. One practice that introduces bias into the shaping of defense policy is the revolving door between the US government and the weapons industry. The movement of retired senior officials from the Pentagon and the military services into the arms industry is a long-standing practice that raises serious questions about the appearance and reality of conflicts of interest. Mostly because employing well-connected ex-military officers can give weapons makers enormous, unwarranted influence over the process of determining the size and shape of the Pentagon budget. A 2021 report by the Government Accountability Office found that 1,700 senior government officials had taken positions in the arms industry over a 5-year period, an average of well over 300 a year. And a new report from the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft found that this practice is particularly pronounced among the top generals and admirals. In the past 5 years, over 80% of retired 4-star generals and admirals, 26 of 32, went on to work in the arms sector as board members, advisors, lobbyists, or consultants. A statistic of that nature is an indication that, to a degree, these are not separate institutions. You have people in Congress investing in stocks and shares that they are in a position to influence the trajectory of. You have a weapons industry that invests significantly in directing and biasing the policy of an entire nation. You have senior officials in very powerful positions within incredibly powerful military organizations that have financial ties to the tune of 86% of them working within the weapons industry. These, again, during a very complex time, are problems that could easily be resolved and solved. The reason they're not being solved is because this is part of a system that, while it is painful for so many people, even those of you that are not directly involved, it's profitable for the people that matter. And you have to ask yourself the question, no matter what they say, what is their moral position? And is their moral position the platform that directs their action? Or is it possible there are other intentions and other agenda? You can ask that broadly about geopolitical conflicts. I understand, as much as someone as abstracted as I am, that this is a situation that almost interrogating and making inquiry of is too painful for people directly involved to countenance. They simply want support for their own perspective. But what we have to look at, in addition to understanding those deep, deep sensitivities that are beyond my comprehension, is that if there is an institutional and profitable component to global conflicts are unlikely to be resolved. Let me know in the chat and the comments how you feel about that. The most recent batch of retired 4-star generals, they're not cookies, are not only seeking employment with the big contractors, they're also branching out to work for small and mid-sized companies that focus on cutting-edge technology, like next-generation drones, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. That's where international conflict and domestic conflict might conflate. Have you noticed that conditions appear to be moving in the direction of population control that has become increasingly militaristic, certainly authoritarian? Have you noticed the militarization of police forces? Are they spending money on drones? Are they gaining access to military vehicles? Are protest laws being introduced? Are new online laws that prevent communication being introduced? Watch these trends. If the past is any guide, this new influx of former military officials into the arms sector will distort Pentagon spending priorities and promote higher military budgets than would be the case absent their influence on behalf of their corporate employers. As documented, there are numerous examples of senior military officials who have advocated for dysfunctional weapons while in government and then gone on to work for the companies that produce those systems. In addition, former military officers have played central roles in preventing the Pentagon from divesting itself of weapons it no longer wants or needs. The prevalence of this kind of activity is hard to track because of the limited information available about what retired military officers do once they join the arms industry. Those military officials were involved in a plan for a surprise party for your birthday, and you ruined it. There's too much at stake, both in taxpayer dollars and our future security, to let conflicts of interest and special interest politics shape the Pentagon budget. The time for Congress to act to reduce the influence of the revolving door is now. Here's some information posted on X by Unusual Wales about the number of Democrats and Republicans investing in oil, energy, and military industrial complex companies. He posted, here's every US politician in Congress who currently holds stock positions that will directly benefit from the war in the Middle East. And I will tell you now, it is not a very short list. One would be too many, but it's more than one, substantially more than one. So baffling, terrifying, and awful though this conflict is and has been for a very long while, let us focus on what we can agree on together. People in Congress should not be able to invest in companies that will benefit from military conflict. Let's end that practice. Let's have a government that's there to serve the people, certainly the domestic population, if it's possible, the population of the world, that have an intention and a trajectory towards beneficial outcomes that are not biased by or in any way guided by personal interest. Only then may we move forward in this new geopolitical climate, in this state of omni-crisis where everywhere you look there are wars in Europe that could escalate into Armageddon, potential wars in Southeast China that could escalate into the apocalypse, and in the Middle East, a region historically troubled by the intervention of imperial and colonial powers, including Britain. While these conflicts continue, there should be no opportunity for profit. It should simply be a complex, difficult, agonizing, painful matter for all those involved, and those of us that are not directly involved should do everything we can to bring about a peaceful solution, even if it is in our own hearts, futile, empty, and shallow as that might sound in such a painful time for so many of you. You all have my sympathy and love. That's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. Support us if you can by pressing the red awaken button. It helps us. It helps our voice to remain as free as possible. It helps us to look for new ways to work together at a time of omni-crisis and global conflict. More important than that? Is it more important than that? Well, if we're ever to change the world, it is. Please, if you can, stay free.